Welcome back to the Political Lens Podcast. Today is the final day of the four-part series. We're going to be talking about the global playbook and the reclaiming of the grid. So let's get into it. The infrastructure investment is a global industry where large firms often operate through layered subsidiaries, each holding the specific regional assets. A parent company headquartered in one country may own a holding company in another jurisdiction, which in turn controls the local operating entities branded with community-friendly names designed to appear regional and familiar. This corporate architecture is legal and widely used in multinational finances because it allows the firms to separate the risk and manage the taxes and structure investments across regulatory environments. However, for residents paying their monthly utility bills, this structure can make ownership difficult to trace. A water system that once appeared to be managed by a local company may ultimately be controlled by an international investment fund whose investors live thousands of miles away. And this distance between the ownership and community can complicate the accountability because the decision-making authority is often concentrated at the corporate or fund management level rather than within the municipality itself. Lobbying efforts at state legislators have played a major role in shaping the regulatory environment that allows these acquisitions to occur. Over the past decade, public-private partnership status have expanded across numerous states as governments search for ways to address the adding infrastructure without dramatically increasing the taxes or public borrowing. In some instances, legislative amendments have reduced the mandatory public referendum requirements for the sale of the concessions of utilities, particularly during declared fiscal emergencies when the municipalities face debt crisis or infrastructure failures. Now, between 2020 and 2025, multiple states quietly revised the frameworks governing how the water systems and the electric utility wastewater networks and sanitation services may be transferred to the private operators. These changes were often embedded inside a broader infrastructure, funding packages, fiscal stabilization, and the bills or the economic development legislation, making them less visible to the general public, despite their long-term implications. Now, at the same time, counter movements have begun gaining momentum across parts of the United States, and municipalization, the process of bringing utilities back under the community's ownership, have become a focal point for residents seeking greater local control over essential services. And Boulder, a long-running attempt to municipalize electric service in order to increase local authority over the renewable energy policies and the grid modernization. The process became a complex legal and financial battle involving the regulatory hearings, negotiations, and investor-owned utilities, and the multiple public votes in Longmont. The voters were successfully approved a municipally owned broadband network, often rejecting proposals for private telecom providers, demonstrating that the community owned the infrastructure models and they can function effectively when the local political support and the financial planning align. Public-owned utilities also across the country are represented by the American Public Power Association, which advocates for the policies that keep the infrastructure revenues circulating and the local rather than being distributed from the shareholders. Communities seeking to maintain the local control are increasingly exploring the alternatives, financing mechanisms which allow infrastructure upgrades without relinquishing the ownership. Green municipal bonds have become one of the fastest growing financing tools for the cities investing in sustainable water and energy systems. State infrastructure banks are also expanding their role in providing low-interest loans for long-term public projects, cooperative ownership structures similar to the rural and electric cooperatives, which created in the mid-20th century. They are being reconsidered as models for the broadband networks, also the microgrids and the water management systems. The transparency reforms are also gaining the attention. Some policy advocates are pushing for laws requiring the full disclosure of the rate modeling assumptions, contact terms, and the investor ownership structures before any infrastructure concession is approved. These reforms aim to ensure that the residents understand the long-term financial implications of transferring the essential services to the private operators. The early warning signs of potential privatization efforts can sometimes appear long before any official announcement. Closed-door municipal meetings discussing assets, valuations, consultants, as well as studies analyzing the potential for the monetization of the infrastructure and the sudden credit ratings or the downgrades tied to the unfolded maintenance and liabilities, which can all signal that a municipality is exploring the sale of concessions of public utilities. The legislative changes that reduce the voters' approval procedures during the fiscal crisis may also indicate the structural shifts are underway. When these signals appear together, they often reflect the broader financial pressures confronting the local governments across the country. And another emerging dimension of the global infrastructure marketplace is increasing the involvement of the sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and the international infrastructure funds seeking to stable long-term returns. For large institutional investors, managing the trillions of dollars in the water systems for the electric grids and waste management networks represent the predictable revenue streams that are less volatile than made traditional investments. These investors frequently hold assets for decades, meaning that the decisions made today about the ownership structures may influence how essential services are governed in an entire generation. As a result, the debates about privatization are no longer just local policy. The local policy disputes, they are part of a longer and a much more conversational about how the global capital intersects with the basic public necessities. With the future of the infrastructure governance will likely involve the hybrid experimentation rather than a single universal model. Some public and private partnerships may deliver the improved access to capital, modern technology, and professional management expertise that municipalities struggle to provide on their own. Other arrangements may produce intense public controversy over the rising rates, reduce the transparency, or diminish local oversight. And what remains constant across every scenario is that the water, electricity, and sanitation and the wastewater services are not optional consumer products. They are the foundational systems upon which the daily life and public health and economic stability depend. Now, over the course of this series, we've explored a transformation that is happening quietly across the United States. What we called the invisible acquisition in part 1, we examined how aging infrastructure and strained municipality budgets are creating the opportunity for large investment firms to purchase or lease essential systems like water, utilities, power grids, and sanitation services. Many of these happen during fiscal emergencies when towns are facing massive repair bills and limited access to the public funding. What begins as financial solution to a local crisis can ultimately reshape who controls the basic systems that our communities rely on every single day. In part 2, we looked at the mechanisms of the extraction, the financial structures behind these acquisitions. Once infrastructure transitions from a public service model to an investment asset, its operational logic begins to change. The revenue streams from monthly utility bills become predictable, and the cash flow that supports the investors return the debt, refinancing, and infrastructure funds that are operating across the global markets. Cost reductions, labor consolidation, and the timing of maintenance investments can all influence the financial performance of these systems. None of this is inherently illegal, but it changes the incentives that guide how essential services are managed. In part 3, we've also examined the human cost of the efficiency where these financial structures intersect with everyday life. Rising utility bills, the affordability concerns, reduced staffing, and longer service response times were the areas where the residents begin to feel the impact directly. Water affordability has become a growing issue across this country, and the communities often find themselves navigating complicated regulatory systems when concerns arise. What may appear efficient on a financial spreadsheet can sometimes look very different from the perspectives of the households and depending on how those services. And in part 4, we take a look back at the global playbook and the effort to reclaim the grid and the infrastructure's ownership. Today is often tied to multinational investment funds, pension systems, and global capital markets. At the same time, a growing number of communities are pushing back through municipalization, cooperative ownership models, and alternative financing tools designed to keep the infrastructure under local control. The future of these systems will likely involve a mix of public ownership, private partnership, and new governance models that are still evolving. Taken together, these 4 parts tell a larger story. America's infrastructure is aging, and massive investments is required to repair and modernize it. The debate isn't simply about whether the investment should happen, it's about who to provide that investment, who controls that system afterwards, and who ultimately benefits from the revenue those systems generate. Because when you turn on your faucet, flip a light switch, or roll your trash bin to the curb, you're interacting with networks that are becoming increasingly connected to the global financial markets. Whether that connection strengthens the community or it weakens your local control, it all depends on the transparency, regulation, and the civic engagement in the years ahead. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I want to thank you for watching the Unfiltered Political Lens Podcast. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Peace.